influencing popular culture, politics, and everything in between. The local station takes you ringside as we discuss the crazy world that is professional wrestling. This is Going Ringside with The Local Station.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of Going Ringside, a special episode we didn't expect to do until this monstrous fight story came up in the last 48 hours involving Elon Musk, tech billionaire, and the other tech billionaire, Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook and Meta. So they actually look like they're kind of serious about this. So this started with Elon Musk because they'd been going back and forth, giving each other a hard time about their respective businesses. And Elon Musk said, I'm up for a cage match if he is. Now, the issue is Mark Zuckerberg has been training in jiu-jitsu and won some tournaments lately. So he replies on Instagram in big, bold lettering, send me location. Musk seems to be all about this. And it's just unthinkable that this could happen. You have two of the wealthiest, most influential men on the planet talking about a cage fight, because that's what Musk says he wants. He wants it in a cage. So no one's really been talking about what would this fight look like. They're talking about everything around it and the back and forth and all this, but we wanted to know what this fight would look like. Dana White recently, the president of UFC, recently said it would be the biggest fight of all time. And why would these billionaires do it? Elon Musk says he did a lot of street fights when he was growing up in South Africa. So there's that. So we are just kind of getting an idea of what this whole process would look like. So I sat down with Ken Shamrock, one of the greatest fighters in history in both UFC. He did some pro wrestling, but he is as well respected as anyone. It's why he was dubbed the world's most dangerous man for so many years. He's now running an organization called Valor Bare Knuckle, Valor BK, still in the fighting world. So I wanted to get Ken's perspective on this fight. And then a little later, we're going to have a younger fighter who's pretty notorious himself coming up in this episode. But I wanted Ken to analyze this. Two guys who are essentially novices with some experience, different age. Elon Musk is around 51. Mark Zuckerberg, I think, is 39. Zuckerberg is smaller. Musk is bigger and has more weight. But Zuckerberg's been training. So we sat down with Ken to get his perspective on how this fight would unfold. He had a lot of perspectives you're not hearing from anyone on the reality of two novices going at it. So as far as Musk versus Zuck, as they're calling it, here's our interview with the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. We are joined by legendary fighter Ken Shamrock right now to discuss this possible fight between Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Ken is currently head of Valor Bare Knuckle, Valor BK. Ken, thanks for joining us today.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Well, Ken, I want to ask, so here's what we know about these two guys. Mark Zuckerberg's about 5'7". He's been doing jiu-jitsu, won some tournaments lately, and training pretty hard. Elon Musk, bigger, about 6'1", heavier, and says his experience was, fighting in South Africa as a kid on the streets. You fought on the streets, you fought professionally all over the world, and you probably dealt with a lot of amateurs. Talk to me about your thoughts on this if it does become a reality.
Well, first of all, it's a lot different when you actually go in and actually fight. It's like somebody could be training in jiu-jitsu or whatever for however long, and they get into a street fight and they get this scrappy kid that just lights them up because they can't seem to get on the ground. And if they do get on the ground, they get the hands thrown at them and they just don't know how to deal with that. So it's a lot different than when you actually go in and fight. And that's why when you hear these guys talking, none of them got any background on actual fighting with mixed martial arts. So, Zuckerberg's got some tournaments that he's done. Credit to him that he's learning it. But again, it's one of those things where someone would probably lean in Zuckerberg's way. And I just say, be very careful, because even if a guy knows how to do submissions, he's still got to get him on the ground. And then when he gets him on the ground, he's got to not get hit. And so I don't know what Elon Musk's background is as far as his toughness and throwing punches. He said he grew up in the streets in Africa and he was fighting all the time. Yeah, but he's been living a soft life for a very, very, very long time. Both of them have. And so it's a lot different. Like Mike Tyson famously said, it's all good until someone punches you in the face. And that's the truth.
So I want to ask, Musk is, they're kind of joking about this on social media, as you expect. But Musk said one thing that I kind of wanted to get your perspective on. He said, I could just get on you with all my weight. And I think he called it the octopus or something like that. Is that a reality? I mean, could he use his weight to his advantage?
No, because the way that jiu-jitsu is they get into this small little ball. And I know from experience on fighting hoists, right? I mean, like they get smaller and it's hard for you to lay your weight on there because then they teeter and they end up rolling you. So if he has any ability at all, obviously it was a different level with hoist for sure. But in this sense, yeah, it can be an advantage, but I don't think so. I think the big advantage here is one, the weight and the length of his arms, because someone like Zuckerberg has got to get him to the ground, and it's a lot more difficult to do it when someone's punching at you as opposed to when you're in a grappling tournament. It's gonna go to the ground. So there's some challenges. It's not a locked-in deal here. Again, like I said, nobody really knows the strengths of either one of them when it comes to fighting. We know what Zuckerberg could do because we've seen him in tournaments, so he has some ability there. But again, like I said, it's just a lot different game when someone is punching at you. And as far as the height-wise, man, that's a huge, huge advantage, for Elon when you're talking about a guy that's that much more taller and be able to hit him before he ever gets into a single spacing.
Now, both these guys have more resources than either of us can imagine. So they could probably hire trainers. They could probably practice, I know, a few months or who knows how long. Like, will that matter? I mean, can you practice enough in, say, 6-month window to really get better if you're essentially a novice?
No. Really, this is just about taking advantage of this situation, because if this is going to happen and there are punches, obviously they're gonna focus on what his strengths are, and that is the stand-up because of the height and the ability to be able to hit him before he ever gets close enough to shoot on him or to clinch him. So that would be something they could work on. You can do that. Like you can literally pinpoint some things that you could take advantage of. And that big advantage is before he ever gets into a place of being able to fight, he is able to hit him and be able to move again and then hit him and be able to move again and force him to have to kind of almost force the issue, which then becomes more dangerous. But again, like I said, in this situation, because of what we know, Zuckerberg does have the advantage because we know what he's capable of doing, right? We know what he has. As far as Elon, we don't know, right? We just don't know. But I can see from the body and everything like that, if he can punch at all or has any ability at all to punch, then he has a huge advantage on the feet.
Want to get your perspective on who they are. So they're both exorbitantly wealthy men, as opposed to a lot of fighters who fight for their life. I mean, that fight for a living. That's how they make their money. Do you think the mentality makes a difference? Or do you think that someone who has exorbitant amounts of money is not maybe just fighting for pride or something, can still get them into the mental space they need to be in?
I think this one's a little bit different because you got two mega monsters in the money industry. So there's a reputation. They're gonna have to live with this the rest of their lives. So there's more there than meets the eye with these guys, and I'm sure because of who they are and what they've been able to accomplish in their lives, they've got a lot of pride. They would have to.
Dana White came out and said it would be the biggest fight of all time. Do you think that's an exaggeration or not far off? Because they're so well known.
I think it's not. I think that's false because I don't believe it'll be a fight. I believe it'll be two combatants in there. I guess you call them combatants that would be trying to take one another out. But let's not go into this fight thing because neither one of these guys are fighters. This is a spectacle. This is something that I think is good for the business. Even though it goes against everything Dana White says he wouldn't do, I think it's smart that he does do it because it's huge. I mean, this is big. But But people are watching it more for the interest of what it's going to look like. I don't think people are going to be satisfied with the outcome and how it ends, because I think one side or the other is going to be lackluster. It's not going to happen the way they want it to. I couldn't personally, in my opinion, tell you which one, because I don't know either one that well.
Last question. If Elon or Mark Zuckerberg want to reach out to you or Valor BK for some guidance or to work with, will you take the call?
Oh, absolutely. But these guys got all the money in the world to buy whatever they want, whatever training that they need. So I think that they're pretty set.
That works. Ken Shamrock, Valor BK, thanks again for joining us, Ken. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So that's what Ken had to say. We were excited to sit down with Ken and get him to offer some perspective. We also got another fighter, a younger fighter, and Mike Dragich. And Mike's got an interesting story. He's in Florida and became really well known for not only being, a professional fighter, but he recently wrestled a 10-foot alligator away from a group of children in Florida to help protect them. He's kind of a gator trapper, hybrid / fighter. So that's a guy who could offer some very unique perspectives. So we wanted to bring him on as well. Here's our interview with Mike Dragich to analyze this fight. Well, we're also being joined by a younger fighter, still active fighter, Mike Dragich, who is from the Jacksonville area and has a pretty interesting, history. Mike, introduce yourself. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. Mike Dragich, I'm from right here in Duval, baby, so I'm glad to be on.
So what kind of fighting have you done? How long have you been doing it?
So I started fighting in the Marine Corps about 10 years ago, and I'm currently an active MMA fighter here locally. So MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, and wrestling is my original background.
Before we get into the Zuck versus Musk fight, tell me about why you were in the news recently. You wrestled an alligator?
Yeah, so I'm a nuisance alligator trapper, and there was a big alligator at an elementary school that they called me to respond to. So I was lucky enough to get out there on that call and remove that alligator. So it was definitely a blessing for me.
What part of the state was this in?
This was in Moncrief, right here in Jacksonville.
Oh, this is Moncrief. How did you wrestle a gator? How did you know how to do that?
Yeah, so I've been doing it for a few years. I've been trained by the best. Some of the Everglade Outlaws down there in South Florida, taught me how to do it. But you got to tire these alligators out and then do what you got to do to get them out of there safely. So that's what we did, man. It was a lot of fun, and it was a good night.
Okay, so why we're really here. Mark Zuckerberg versus Elon Musk. I just talked to Ken Shamrock. He's been a fighter for decades. I wanted to talk to a new fighter because both these guys in their respects, if they do this, would be relatively novice. You're much more experienced than they would be. But I kind of want to get your perspective, put your memory back to what it was like when you just started out. So Mark Zuckerberg has been training in jiu-jitsu. He's a smaller guy. He's about 5'7", but won some tournaments. Elon Musk, about 6'1". He's 51, a lot older, about 12 years older than Mark Zuckerberg. And he said he did some street fighting as a kid and has more weight on him. Yeah. Wanted to get your thoughts on this fight for two guys who are relative amateurs. How would you see this going?
So I'm always going to put my money on the trained fighter. I do think size has a bit to do with it when it's skill for skill. But if Zuckerberg is a trained, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter and he's actively training and winning competitions, which he is, my money's on him. With that being said, I have heard that Elon Musk has a prior history in training karate and other different martial arts like jiu-jitsu and wrestling as well. If that's true, I don't know how recent it is, but it could be a pretty fair fight. I'm always going to put my money on the trained guy. Size, if you're not training, it doesn't do too much for you.
So these guys have all the money in the world, literally, and they could hire the best trainers on the planet if they wanted to. So let's say they train for a few months because they know that the whole world's going to watch this. Can training accomplish a lot in a few months, or is this something that takes years?
So it's going to take a while. I definitely think that more than just the training, it's that atmosphere of being there and fighting in front of a lot of people. So I don't know. I would never put my money on this fight because you've got Zuckerberg, who has a little bit of training. You've got Elon Musk, who doesn't seem to have a lot of training. At the end of the day, when that cage closes, man, you don't know what you're going to do for your first fight in front of that many people. So it's a 50-50 shot on who's going to win this.
So one thing Elon Musk said, he was because they're kind of joking about this on social media. He's joking about his weight, that he weighs a lot more, that he just get on top of him and put his weight on him. Is that a real thing? Do you think that could make a difference?
If you know how to use your weight, yes. If it's a skill for skill fighter, and these guys are both on the same level, every pound counts. But for an untrained fighter against a trained guy in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, man, I don't really think it matters. I've seen some little savages throw around some pretty big dudes.
And if Zuckerberg does get trapped under his weight, what does he do? I mean, what are your options as a fighter if someone's on top of you that big?
Sweep him, use his weight against him, use that leverage to flip him over and gain the dominant position. And if he's actively competing in jiu-jitsu, that's definitely the martial art to have for that situation.
So the ages, they're a lot older than you. I mean, the ages are 39, 51, maybe 40 and 52 by the time this fight happens, if it does. Do you think age plays a role? There is a big difference physically between 40 and 50.
I also know some tough older fighters, but if he hasn't been conditioning is going to be a huge factor as well. So I think that it's looking on the upside for Zuckerberg, but you can never count anybody out. You don't really know their background, and I don't think he's telling everything there is to the story.
And can new fighters or inexperienced fighters look just clumsy, in the ring? I mean, we're used to watching UFC fights where it's, top level guys, but can newer fighters, which I'm sure you've seen or you've been a new fighter at one point, can you look clumsy or just discombobulated going through the fight?
Absolutely, for sure. I actually lost my very first fight. I got in there. I had what they call the adrenaline dump. And, the nerves and the crowd of people got to me, and I definitely didn't perform the way that I know I could perform. So that's definitely a very real thing. We'll see how these guys show up that night.
Well, Mike Dragich, fighter, Gator stopper. We appreciate it, Mike. And thanks for representing Duval today. We appreciate it. Thanks, Mike, for joining us.
Duval, stand up. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
So that's our analysis of Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg, a battle of the billionaires. Where have I heard that before? Oh, I think Trump was involved that in wrestling, but this is more some real style fighting, UFC style, maybe Valor BK if they want to get in touch with Ken. But we'll have to see how this goes down if Musk and Zuckerberg do in fact make this a reality and not just social media gossip. It will be exciting. And a word to Elon and Mark. Hey, if you guys want to talk about the fight, come on Going Ringside. We would love to have you. You're welcome anytime before or after to analyze and talk about this fight for us. If anyone listening right now knows Zuckerberg or Musk, let them know. We'd love to have them on to analyze the fight and check out some of that advice from Ken Shamrock, who we're so appreciative of today. So thanks for joining us on this special episode of Going Ringside.
This has been Going Ringside with The Local Station, brought to you every Wednesday on your favorite podcast player, on News4Jax Plus, as well as the News4Jax YouTube channel.